Students put hours and hours of preparation into their events for speech and debate competitions. And that all comes to a head when you find out whether or not you broke. What does that mean? Well, in this lesson, we're going to be talking about breaking and out rounds. So, breaking means that you have gone to a number of preliminary rounds. You have a guaranteed number of rounds. So in individual events, sometimes that's 2 or 3. And for debate events, it's typically 4 to 6 rounds that you have. And so those are guaranteed. You are guaranteed to either give 2 or 3. You check the tournament invitation about how many those are, right? And those preliminary rounds are where you are trying to get the best marks possible in order to break. That means you are breaking into, not out of, you're breaking into elimination rounds, also known as out rounds. So you're breaking to out rounds, breakout. So what happens at the preliminary rounds is that you are trying to get at least enough of a sort of mark on your ballots when they are tabulated, when they're added together. They show you ranked very highly amongst all your peers that are in the same event. This is the hard part about that is you don't know exactly what ranking you need in order to do that because it is based upon the size of the entry. One thing you can pretty much count on is that no matter how many people are entered into the event, no more than half will be broken out. So what that means is that like in a very small entry, sometimes let's say that there's only 10 people entered into one particular event. There's only 10 students that have actually put together a poetry or something like that. The tournament will not break more than 5 of them. Okay, so you know for a fact that no more than 50% of the entry will go into elimination rounds. The one exception to that is if you have an entry that's like less than 7, all they'll do is 3 rounds. It won't technically be a final round, and what they will do is they'll take the accumulations from the 3 rounds and just give an award for that. Okay, so, but if you do well in your 2 or 3 rounds in individual events, or if you have a winning record after 4 or 6 rounds of debate, then you can count on more competition against people who also did really well. All right. Typically, that means in an individual event, you need to get like top 3 in your round. And so if you want to kind of gauge how you're doing, you can estimate compared to your competition, how you're doing. And if you feel like you are getting in the top 3, then there is a pretty good chance that you will find yourself in the elimination rounds afterwards. Now, not everyone is able to predict that. You don't know exactly what the judge is putting down on the ballot for it. But if you get top 3 in your 2 or 3 rounds, is a pretty good chance you're in the elimination rounds. Once there, you have to be ready for a very different environment than preliminary rounds. In preliminary rounds, normally you only have your competitors and the judge. So in debate, that just means the 1 or 2 people you're debating against and a judge. So there's only 3 to 5 people in a whole classroom, right? So it's largely empty. In an individual event, you'll have like 5 to 7 competitors, including yourself, plus the judge in the back of the room. That means you have less than 10 people in a full-size classroom. That's also fairly empty. Once you get into the elimination rounds, you can almost guarantee that will be a much larger audience because there will be people who did not break that are coming to watch your round. These are other competitors, sometimes other coaches, but there also might be some friends of the people who are there, some family members who were invited, and they're watching as well. Sometimes even coaches from other teams are coming to see what the fuss is about. They're actually scouting the events that are winning. They want to see what topics are in the elimination round so they know what to expect in future competitions and adapt to it. So one thing you got to be prepared for if you make it to the elimination rounds is a larger audience. Now, a larger audience means that you have to make adaptations. In any event where you have maybe some jokes, that means that you have to pause longer because the audience might be laughing more, that their laughter will actually create enough volume that they can't hear what's happening. If you keep on just going through your lines as they're doing that, people might miss it. So you have to pace yourself differently, especially if you are in an event like speech to entertain, or also known as after dinner speaking, right? Now, some people might be concerned because if your speech has a time limit of 10 minutes and you are kind of pushing that without the pausing for laughter, you're worried that you might be going over time. You're going to want to check with the tournament that you are competing in on whether or not they are keeping time in the elimination rounds. Now, there's a lot of tournaments that, especially for the event of speech to entertain, they realize that the laughter actually throws off your timing enough that they don't time the final round. But that's not a guarantee. You want to see if they're going to keep time in the final round, and if they are, then you might have to actually cut off the audience. Heck, you could even make a joke about it. You're like, hey, you got to keep it down. I got a time limit or something like that, right? You could actually work it into your speech a bit, but your timing and your pace is going to be different in front of a large audience than in front of a normal preliminary audience. Okay. Another thing about audience memberships, especially when it comes to debate, that the feedback that you get might throw you off a bit more. When you're performing in front of a judge, I know from experience that I'm taking notes so much that I have very little opportunity to actually give any sort of feedback. People who compete in front of me oftentimes have no idea where I stand on the arguments that they're making, but they get a much better idea if the audience groans or if they like knock in agreement, or it gives some sort of feedback one way or another. So be ready for more feedback, more noticeable feedback when you are in out rounds. The next thing is that the competition is going to be very different. These people have already proven that they belong in the final round, just like you do, okay? You also earned a spot in that elimination round. I've had students in the past that are completely fine in the preliminary rounds. They do beautifully. And once they get to the elimination round, then it starts impacting their nerves a whole lot. Remind yourself, you earned your spot there. Okay, you belong in that elimination round just as much as your opponent does. So don't let that get to you. All right. Sometimes it takes a 1 or 2 tournaments for you to actually gain that level of confidence. Don't let that get to you. It happens, especially if it's your very, very first time in an elimination round. If you feel like you didn't do that well, realize you are in very good company. It is part of the learning process. You do not need to beat yourself up, okay? The elimination rounds come with a different level of stress for some people than for others. On the other hand, you can use the audience to your benefit. If you are able to play off the audience and to use their feedback, it actually helps with your performance. And what may have been a fairly mediocre speech, and where, like you're doing well, but you're not getting first in the preliminary rounds, you might be putting yourself in a really good position for first because of your audience and the reaction that you are able to get out of that as well. Okay. Also, a little reminder about a previous lesson that we had, where if you are not in a break round, you should attend break rounds. Now, I suggest you go and watch your teammates because that gives them support. But perhaps you are, on a team that didn't have anyone in, a particular elimination round. Go and watch something that you enjoy. Those speeches to entertain are amazing, as well as the oral interpretation events as well. But you should go and watch elimination rounds because if nothing else, it will help you to see what wins. It helps you to identify what is beneficial. Remember, elimination rounds have a slightly different feel. They might even have a accelerated or elevated level of stress that don't exist in the preliminary rounds. But if you get yourself in the right mindset, you can actually use that environment to your advantage.